Good evening to everyone. My name is Adrieannette Ciccone, and again, I want to thank you so much for joining us this evening. The Racial Justice Working Group is a newly formed group through CLA, and the purpose of our group is to create solutions to actively dismantle systemic institutional racism. We were formed in response to the killing of George Floyd and countless other African Americans who have been killed by police and others, in addition to general racism and discrimination that many attorneys of color, Black lawyers face today in work, school, and business. We invite you to join our working group by sending your email in the chat box, and I will also provide our email address if you're interested. Our group plans to work on public education, member education on legal issues, member engagement and empowerment of how to get involved in the community, and by creating a community of members and other lawyers in California, and systemic and advocacy issues, which will most likely be a long view effort. Tonight's program is focused on African American lawyers who are CLA members and other bar association. This evening, we will be hearing from rockstar attorney Adante Pointer, who is a civil rights powerhouse and who has also had some unfortunate, devastating encounters with the police himself. Dianne Jackson McLean, who is a partner and stellar real estate development attorney, and who also serves on the Real Property Section's Executive Committee. We have Miss Demetria Graves, who is an amazing family law attorney who is actively involved with FlexCom, which is the Family Law Executive Committee section. We have Terrance Evans, who is a partner at Duane Morris, and he's vice chair of the litigation section, and he is a fellow Cornell alumni, go Big Red. And he also serves as the vice chair of the Charles Houston Bar Association. And last but not least, we have Mr. Otis Bruce, who is a longtime district attorney in Marin County, who is also involved with the criminal section. Our format for this evening is very informal. And given the number of people in the town hall, we will mute everyone but the speakers. After they speak, we will mute everyone to allow for greater participation. We will conclude around 7:30, so please relax, grab yourself a refreshment and something to eat. With that, has Adante joined us?
I have. I'm here. I'm somewhere in Zoom land.
Oh, well, welcome, Adante. I gave a brief introduction about you. If you would like to start this evening off, that would be wonderful. And I'm just looking for you to share your story with us, how you chose the path to being an attorney, the kind of cases that you do, and most importantly, how has racism impacted you both professionally and personally?
Sure. Well, thank you. I'll be happy to do that. Thank you for inviting me, onto the program, allowing me to obviously share my experience directly as it relates to my interaction with the police and so on and so forth, but also just my journey to this stage of my life in terms of being a professional and an attorney. Born and raised here in Oakland, I grew up in a part of town where we actually had a lot of what people are protesting and upset about, and the spotlight is shining on right now, happening in my community. There was a group of police officers from Oakland Police Department called the Riders. Those officers terrorized my community. They planted evidence. They did a whole bunch of different things. And so growing up, seeing that and watching that and hearing about it, frankly, influenced the way in which I saw my relation and my community's relation to the police. These are officers who actually wound up getting prosecuted, and the leader actually fled the country and has never come back during the case of being criminally prosecuted. So that framed the way in which, like I said, I saw my community's relationship with the police, as well as the other big civil rights and police cases of his day, the Rodney Kings and everything else. So I had a fortunate position to, as I had like a front row seat to this, I also, while I grew up in that community, I went to school on the other side of the community in Piedmont. So I had the advantage of kind of living in two worlds at one time. And because of that, I could really see the disparities as it relates to the resources, whether that's education, whether that's economic, and just the social networks if you will, and I'm not talking about Facebook or Instagram or any of the things that we think about now. I mean the social network in terms of the network that your community has to sustain itself, and the lack thereof in my community, but the abundance of resources in Piedmont and in the more well-to-do communities that I was going to school in. And so seeing that fueled my passion to try to figure out how my community could get its fair share of the pie, if you will, and why my community looked the way it did, and understanding that what was happening in Oakland and what had happened was happening all over the country in different cities that, you know, in the Black communities. And so that fueled my thoughts about going into politics, but ultimately I decided to follow a career in law, given that as I matured and was more educated, I started feeling like the impact I could have might be a little bit more direct in terms of being an attorney and the skills of which you would have as an attorney, whether that's advocacy, thinking through a problem, and the social capital, if you will, to kind of have a bully pulpit to get things done, seemed more attractive to me. So I wound up going to UC Berkeley, graduated from there, and that's, you know, met Demetria there, and, you know, go Bears. Went to Cal, and that was one heck of an experience. You know, worked on Capitol Hill while I was there, worked for Congresswoman Barbara Lee, Congressman Dellums, and then found my way to law school at UC Hastings, which, as we all know, is in San Francisco, but still here in the Bay Area. When I was going through law school, had the pleasure of being in the LEOP program, and, you know, that legal educational opportunity program at Hastings. I otherwise would not have even been admitted into law school at Hastings if not for that program. So, you know, I owe a debt of gratitude to that program and for it being there and giving an opportunity for someone like me who otherwise would not have been able to continue my career path at that time at such a good institution. When I came out of Hastings, like many people I'm sure can relate to, I was looking for a job. I didn't have the benefit of a summer associate that turned into a position. I find myself looking for opportunities and essentially being told I had a great resume, great, you know, stellar this, but no job. There was no opportunity for me. And, you know, it was stunning because up until then, I thought I had done everything that I had been told had been asked of me to do in terms of taking advantage of internships, getting the grades, making the connections, you know, even to the point, and this is funny, I can laugh at it now, but even to the point of trying to mold myself in a way to where I thought I can't even have any facial hair if I go on these job interviews and I have to have a gray suit, a blue suit, and this gray tie, and dress a particular way, really, you know, without allowing myself and my individual style or taste to come out, trying to mold myself into something that would be palatable to employers, and still found myself without a job. That was very humbling. And then at some point in time, I focused in on working with the great attorney, John Burris, and I had at that time, no real ambitions on being a civil rights attorney. I thought that was like leading marches, which is interesting because I do that now, not so much early in my career. But, you know, I thought it was doing that type of stuff. And I was saying, that's not really what I had in mind. I wanted to do something more business related, more transactional, deal with the economic relationships that our community deserved and had been starved for generations. But like I said, found myself on the doorstep at Mr. Burris's office. And after many emails and all kind of stuff, found myself there practicing law and doing the type of law that is, frankly, it fits my personality and in a style and a way in which things that I believe in, which allows me to persevere through all the ups and downs that we all as attorneys know you're going to have in your career. But through that lens of working in that office, I also did criminal defense. And so I also did the civil rights and police brutality cases. And it was eye-opening because before police brutality and defund the police and BLM and Blue Lives or whatever else that you associated with what's going on today in terms of this critical issue, it was not the cause du jour. It was not the practice area anybody was interested in. It was not the thing that was going to cover the front news of the newspaper, although people were dying in the streets. Lives were being ruined every day. And so, you know, it was actually more of a marginalized practice, especially post 9/11, when sentiment was high in this country for first responders. And it was very hard to bring any case and to get people to care about what happened to you if you happened to be victimized by the police. And so the work was going on really in silence and in the dark. And growing up here in Oakland, like I mentioned, seeing what had happened in my community, but then myself, when I started driving as a teen, I got pulled over as a young man so many times, I almost just thought that this was what it was. It was a rite of passage, and you learn how to try to survive those encounters, even though because I had friends that were well-to-do on the other side of town, when we would get pulled over, the sentiment in the car would be like asking the officer, well, why are you stopping me? Like, what is your basis to contact me? And it was much more confrontational. Whereas with my friends and I, who were from my part of the town, or my black friends, if you will, we got pulled over, it's 10-2, yes, sir. What's going on? You're trying to appease the officer in hopes that he won't, either give you a ticket or harass you and all these type of things. This is the reality in which I certainly grew up in and a lot of other especially young black men and women grew up in dealing with. And so to now fast forward, if you will, to being an attorney and representing these people, it's my honor to do so. But not only was I someone who represented these people and had understood that in my background and in my past, I had gone through these similar things. But even as an attorney that, occasionally might be in the newspaper, on TV, and had over a course of at that point, 12 to 13-year career, had been repeatedly suing Oakland Police Department and other police departments in the Bay Area for all sorts of misgivings. I can't say this enough, there are so many tragic, horrible, heinous things that go on that never meet the paper. It never makes the paper. You'll never hear these people's names, but yet their lives matter too. And so as much as all the names that we are familiar with, they deserve all of the attention and pain and empathy and spirit of the fight and the resistance for justice for them as well. But trust me, what we're talking about is the tip of the iceberg. That's what society is seeing. And if you're mad about the tip of the iceberg, wait until you see the rest of the iceberg below the water that sunk the Titanic. And that's what we're dealing with as a country, frankly. And so the issue is so big and multifaceted, it's easy to get caught up in some of the taglines, and you might not agree with Black Lives Matter. You say, well, what does that mean? How come we can't say all lives matter? And one of the things that when I'm speaking about this, I tell people is, look, just because I say I love me doesn't mean I hate you. But if you think me saying that affirmatively that I love me is offensive to you, then that's saying more about you and less about me. Because all I said was that I love me. Black lives matter. But if a person finds that offensive, then there's something that you think is wrong with loving Black lives and that they matter. That's what your critique is. It's not the fact that, I said anything wrong. If I say I like the Warriors, that doesn't mean I hate every other team. It's just my favorite team is the Warriors. I like the Warriors. I'm a fan of the Warriors. That doesn't mean that I'm against every other team. I have players on other teams that I like and other teams that I root for too. But that's the type of the context in which this thing is put in. And it makes the dialogue that much tougher. So going back to fast forwarding to today with me as an attorney, 3 years ago, I had the unfortunate, but then fortunate opportunity, if you will, to be driving my nice car, minding my business, going to the grocery store the day after Christmas to get some food, and obeying all the laws, was really just in my mind driving like we all do. You're thinking of things. You're not on the phone. It's just kind of, where your destination is, and you're just kind of mindlessly driving. Unbeknownst to me, Oakland Police Department was right behind me. And they turned on their flashing red light, and I was startled. So I was like, oh my gosh, they were so close on the tail of my car. So I just pulled over to allow them to go around me, thinking that they must be on their way to an emergency somewhere. And lo and behold, when I just kind of angled the front of my car towards the curb to allow them to continue in traffic, they pulled even closer on my bumper. And as I'm looking in the rear view, I see doors open up. And next thing you know, I'm being shouted at from multiple people. And I could tell the officers have their guns out. And they're at the same time, they're telling me to get out the car right now. Get out the car right now. And they're yelling and they're aggressive. And I'm seeing the guns. There's another set of officers on the passenger side of my car who's telling me to put my hands up and don't you effing move. Put your hands up, don't you move. So right now, I'm in a a life or death situation. I'm in a life and death dilemma where if I potentially pick one set of orders over another, it could easily result in me being shot and killed. Because while they're telling me to hurry up and get out the car right now, and the aggressiveness that this officer is saying is with a gun in his hands on the driver's side of the car, they're just as aggressively on the passenger side of the car telling me to put my hands up and don't you move. And so, I started panicking. My chest is heaving, going up and down. I'm thinking to myself, what am I going to do? The windows are up. It's like 7:00 at night. This is, wintertime in the Bay Area. So my windows are up. Like, I can't just talk to them. I had to start essentially yelling through the windows as to negotiating my life. Now, I'm negotiating my life, and I negotiate cases for a living. But never did I think I was going to have to negotiate my life on the side of a road because of a traffic stop where I hadn't done anything. And to kind of fast forward through the story, as I negotiated my way out the car by asking permission to do different things and doing it slow and letting them know what I was going to have to do, they were so aggressive that they were just frantically yelling these orders that were contradictory, but yet expecting me. The onus was on me to be the cool, calm, collected one. The onus was on me to de-escalate the situation. The onus was on me to be staring down the barrel of a gun, but yet have some discipline in a way to where the police wouldn't shoot and kill me. And I felt so alone in that moment because one of the thoughts that was going through my mind was, who's going to tell my story if this happens to me right now? I've looked at these videos for a living and helped people do on these cases, and now it's on me. And so when I got out the car, I turned towards the officers, hands up, and I'm like, hey, I'm an attorney. The first thing they said was, about all that later. Get on the ground right now. Get on the ground. Mind you, with the guns pointed at me. So I had to get on the ground, and they made me crawl backwards. Now, I'm not 100 years old. I'd like to think I'm in decent shape. But frankly, I haven't crawled backwards in a long time. And I certainly never did it with the gun, multiple guns being pointed at me. I was nervous. I didn't know what was going to happen. And they wound up putting me in the cop car, handcuffs on, and then they searched my car. And they're tearing up my car, going through my car, and they're asking me, my name. And I'm like, hey, the same, my name, my ID, everything's matched up. It's this is Adante. I'm Adante. What is going on here? The explanation I was given after they ransacked my car and came back to talk to me was that the first thing they said was, well, sir, we got a call that someone in a gray car brandished an AK-47 in Oakland. Mind you, I'm in San Leandro, so I'm not even in the city of Oakland. I'm in San Leandro, and they're telling me about a crime that someone committed in a gray car earlier in the day with an AK-47. Now, just so everybody can understand this, I'm driving an S550 Mercedes-Benz. I don't think there's many people riding around of Oakland brandishing AK-47s out of one of the latest S550 high-class model Mercedes-Benzes. I'm sorry. And I know for certain that they weren't going to Piedmont, Montclair, or into the more well-to-do areas, pulling over everybody in a silver car under threat of losing their lives. And so after they went through my car, had nothing, they then pulled me out the car when the sergeant came, and he apologized, or he started his apology by saying, hey, my guys were responding to this call. They were a little, and I told him, I said, aggressive. That's who you guys were. You almost got me killed. He says, well, you have to understand, we're responding to a call. We got a call about someone who fired an AK-47 out of a silver car. So it went from somebody brandished, showed one, threatened with something, to now they did a drive-by out of an S550 Mercedes-Benz. It was disheartening. It was ridiculous. But in that moment, I was not about to litigate anything. All I wanted to do was get home to my family and survive, And that's what I'm sure is very common in terms of when I've represented and talked to people is that, when you're in that position, you're powerless. And here, this is something that I do every day. I know what the steps are in terms of vindicating people's rights. But even somebody like me with whatever social capital you think I may or may not have, I had none, zero. I was at the whim of somebody who had a badge and a gun and all the authority in the world to kill me and make up a story and know that they're going to get a free pass. And, you know, we often hear that they're afraid and they want to go home to their family, but what about us? I want to go home to my family too. You know, is that a crime? I was just driving a car, but yet you threaten me within an inch of my life, and then you go on, and the onus is on me to remain calm. But you're the one with the training and all the guns. And, you know, many of us show up to work every day in our profession, and, you know, we suffer that big indignity, but then there's a lot of other micro, you know, transgressions and things too that we suffer, and yet we put all that to the side in order to perform the task and our expectations of us. And so, you know, I'm not gonna, I know there's other people who have stuff to share in their experiences, but I'll just conclude with this, just as an attorney. So that was on the streets as an attorney, what happened to me when I was treated as if I wasn't. I was just treated as the way people get treated. But I do think this is another story I'd like to share just for a quick second. And that is I was defending a young man in juvenile court in Contra Costa. And, you know, it was a contentious case, a very serious case, being a criminal defense attorney at this time. And the judge would not even allow me to speak. Like literally. The judge would not allow me to speak at a hearing where this young man's life is hanging in the balance. And when I protested saying, hey, judge, this isn't fair. You got to at least allow me, as we all know, to say, make our record. I'm like, just at least allow me to make my record. He had the bailiff come over and stand beside me and was threatening to take me into custody as an officer of the court. You know, it's that type of, and some of us here might say, well, you know, that might have happened to me and so on. The point is, the power dynamics at play there, the disrespect that you would feel comfortable enough to do, that's the type of stuff, even as an attorney, being in your suit, representing your client, being a zealous advocate, or just trying to advocate, that's what you're met with sometimes. So, you know, and it takes other forms, maybe not as extreme as that, but that's what we're dealing with here. And, you know, there was a bunch of people in that courtroom, court staff and otherwise, who sat silently by, and myself and my family, we're the only Black people in that courtroom. And how do you think that family felt? Like, continue on with my services after, just because I want to speak up for their son, I'm being threatened with arrest. So not only was that a personal insult against me, but it was professional, and it was something that could have endangered my relationship with my client. And then how can they ever trust in the justice that's being meted out in that courtroom when the person who's on the bench and responsible for meting out justice and equality and fairness and all the things that we hold dear is showing themselves to be biased? So, you know, these are the fight that continues every day. It was a low point, but we still press on, because what choice do we have? We can't give up in this fight for justice.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that with us, Adante. I know you've shared it with me before, but it's just, it's mind-boggling to hear again, and it's quite upsetting. So thank you so much for sharing that. Who wants to go next? Our panelists, do we have any volunteers? Demetria?
Hi, everyone. I'm Demetria Graves, and yes, I went to school with Adante. Hi, Adante. Go Bears. I actually grew up in Pasadena, California, and I actually have a very different experience than Adante. I grew up in a house where my mother was a sheriff, and my dad was assistant fire chief of LA County. I have an uncle now that's in SWAT. So the whole time I grew up, my license plates were covered by the police department. So I didn't get pulled over much, or if I did, it was, let me call your mom, what's going on, that sort of thing. So growing up, I didn't really have those experiences. And of course I knew it existed, but that just wasn't my life. I went on to Berkeley, then I went on to Loyola Law School. And like Adante, I thought I was doing everything right. I got the grades, like Adante said. I interned, you know, I'm outgoing, so I didn't think I was going to have any problem getting the job, but I did. So I ended up starting my own practice 6 months after I passed the bar at 25 years old, and I had no clue what I was doing, believe me. But I figured it out. But I noticed in court, I was often mistaken for the court reporter or an assistant to an attorney and never the attorney. And that was hard for me. But I think the hardest thing for me is I noticed as I started attending programs in family law, as I became a specialist in family law, African Americans are not asked to be on the panels for the big seminars. We're not asked to speak. We're not asked to share our knowledge. And as I went on, I continued to see that more and more, it was no one that looked like me presenting on the topic of family law, although I know that there's a lot of very, very smart family law attorneys in my field that are African American or otherwise. And then I got on the FlexCom committee about 3 years ago, and yet again, there were no African Americans on the committee at that time. I will say, because I love FlexCom, that it is changing and they're working hard to make sure it is diversified, but we're not there. We're not on the executive committees. We're not speaking. We're not anywhere. And so I have made it my mission to change that on FlexCom, on all of the committees that speak and present our materials to us. We are just as smart. We can do it. There's no reason for us not to do it. And for me, that's been the most heartbreaking, I want to say racism, because, or maybe some of our colleagues just don't know. So I hope they are listening to us and realize we are just as smart. We go and become specialists just like everybody else. And I think it's time for us to have an opportunity to do that. So it's hard to hear that Adante is dealing what he's dealing with, and a lot of those who are going to speak are dealing what we're dealing with outside of the courtroom, inside of the courtroom, and then also within the communities with our colleagues. And so because of that, I agree that we all have a long way to go. And I know, like Adante, I am very much committed to this, and I'm so happy that you all form this committee, because I think it's really, really important. So I'm gonna keep mine short and let everybody else speak, but if you have questions about what I've said, please ask me in the chat.
Thank you so much, Demetria. I really appreciate your story. And I also have had a lot of experience with not being able to get hired myself. I went to Cornell undergrad. I have 2 master's degrees, and I went to law school, and I found myself literally like clabbering trying to get hired somewhere. And so it's a real thing. And so I was wondering, well, what is it? Is it because I didn't intern with this firm that summer? Is that why? And clearly that's my pedigree wasn't the problem. It was just the hue of my skin. So who wants to go next?
You know what?
Terrance?
Yeah, I'm happy.
Okay. Yes. Talk to us, Terrance.
Thank you. So I'll just take a moment to talk a little bit about who I am and my connection with this committee. Thank you, Adrieannette, for your leadership. Thank you, Ona, for your leadership. My name is Terrance Evans. I am a partner at Duane Morris, where I'm also the vice chair of our banking practice. I'm also the co-chair of our diversity and inclusion program. My practice focuses on the financial services industry. I represent banks. I represent real estate developers, and I've been involved in some of the biggest financial related cases in the country. I think I'm the only African American I've ever seen in any of the cases that I've been involved with for nearly 20 years. Before becoming a partner at Duane Morris, and when I became a partner, we have been in business for over 110 years. I was the first African American man promoted to partner from associate at our law firm. I wear a number of hats. So in addition to being partner, I'm also the vice chair of the litigation section and the chair-elect of our litigation section. I'm the vice president of Charles Houston Bar Association, which is the largest African-American bar association in Northern California. I'm on the executive board of the Bar Association of San Francisco. I'm also on the advisory board of the Minority Corporate Counsel Association, and I am the past chair of the Leadership Development Committee of the Association of Business Trial Lawyers. I was actually the first person of color to ever lead that organization in its then 40-plus year history. I went to undergrad at Cornell University, alums of that great institution with Adrieannette, and actually went to law school with Demetria. I was a couple of years ahead of her, but also an alum of Loyola Law School. And I've been very involved in the community with different projects and pro bono work that I've done representing victims of domestic violence, representing victims of child abuse, elder abuse.
Terrance, I don't mean to jump in, but can you tell us the year that you graduated from law school and then also the year that you made partner, just to give us some more context about that?
Oh, sure. I was trying not to date myself, but I graduated from law school in 2002. I made partner January 1st of 2011. And the way I made partner, there's so few African-American partners. I think we're less than 2% of partners at the top 100 law firms. The way I made partner was through business development, which is not always easy when you're a person of color. I was pretty fortunate that around 2007, 2006, we were in the early stages of the financial crisis, and I decided that I wanted to get into financial services. I saw that there was a niche for myself there at the firm, and so I taught myself through help from a number of people, and I built that practice from the ground. So I started our banking practice, and during the financial crisis, it really took off, and it was through the book of business that I was able to build that I was able to leverage that into partnership. During my law school years, and this was during my first year of law school, I was in a coffee shop in Los Angeles, and I'll tell you 3 experiences that I had with the police, because as a lot of my colleagues here have said, we try to do everything right. You try to make sure that you get the education, you have the credentials, but many times it doesn't make a difference, because when people see you, they see the color of your skin. They don't see that you have an Ivy League degree or that you've accomplished any of these things. They just see a black face. So I've told this story many times over the past few weeks, but during my first year of law school, I was studying for a criminal law exam. I was in a coffee shop in Los Angeles. It was called Buzz Coffee. It no longer exists. It's now an Italian restaurant, but I was there minding my business. I did all my studying in coffee shops. I hated libraries. And I was there with my laptop and my books, and I was doing what I needed to do to be ready for this exam. I looked up, and there were 4 police officers that came in the coffee shop. And one of them said that I fit the description of a robbery suspect. Before I knew it, I was surrounded by 12 police officers. 4 of those police officers pulled their guns on me, and they had them pointed directly at my head. I had already had the conversation growing up with my parents about what to do when you have interactions with the police, to be very deferential, not to make any sudden movements, not to give them any excuse to kill you. So as I sat there, I tried to figure out, how do I communicate to these officers that I'm not a threat, that I'm not a robbery suspect, and that it is safe for them to put their guns down and far away from my head. So I began to explain to them, hey, I'm just a law student. I'm not the guy you're looking for who was involved in this robbery, and I can prove that I'm a law student. Look, I have law school books all around me. I have a law school ID in my pocket. I was afraid to show them my ID because I was afraid that if I reached for my wallet, which was in my right front pocket, they would think I was reaching for a weapon and would immediately pull the trigger, and that would be the end of my life. So I had to have a conversation with them, and I said, in my right front pocket is my wallet. I have no weapons. I'm not a threat to you, but I can show you my law school ID if you allow me to do that. They still were holding their guns, and I talked to them very slowly. I am reaching from my right front pocket where I have a wallet, where I have my law school ID. I am now taking my wallet, which is not a weapon. It is no threat to you, and I'm taking it out so that you can see my law school ID and see that I am a law student. There's no reason to pull your guns. So I pulled my wallet out. I told one of the officers who was closest to me where the law school ID was in there. They looked at that. They still detained me for a significant amount of time, but after seeing that, they lowered their weapons and eventually decided that I was not the suspect that they were looking for. After that experience, which was one of the most traumatic experiences of my life, it was the first and only time that I've had 4 guns. And I don't know if you've ever had a gun pointed at your head or had 4 guns pointed at your head. It's a very traumatic experience. Went on, graduated from law school. I was doing well. I was in Sonoma County Superior Court to argue a dispositive motion in a very high profile banking case. You figure, you know what, I've made it. I'm a partner. I'm doing it. I'm doing what I need to do. I show up dressed very well in my suits. I have my beautiful briefcase with my papers to argue this motion. And I am detained by one of the officers as I go through security because he says that I look suspicious. And I said, well, what do you mean I look suspicious? I'm an attorney. I'm here to argue a motion in a pretty significant case. He said, you look like a criminal. You don't look like a lawyer. I don't believe you're a lawyer. I think you're impersonating a lawyer, and I am going to detain you. And I said, well, I have a motion that I have to argue. I'm here, and I'm supposed to meet with Judge so-and-so. My case is going to be heard. I need to argue my case. He says, I don't care what you say. I don't believe you. And I was detained. I was detained for about 2 hours. I missed my hearing. I missed arguing my case because I looked suspicious. I looked, and I can't tell you how many times during my career people have told me, you don't look like a lawyer. Are you sure you're a lawyer? Are you a real lawyer? Did you graduate from law school? Did you pass the bar? I mean, do you like really practice law, like go to court? And always having to validate myself. I remember I was preparing a CEO of a company that our firm represented for his deposition. We had been in communication multiple times over a year. Apparently, he had never bothered to look me up. I'm very active on social media. It's pretty hard to not know who I am. I'm the only Terrance Evans practicing law in North America. But when I went to greet him in the lobby, he said, oh my God, you're Terrance Evans? I said, yeah, I'm Terrance Evans. He's like, wow, you don't sound black on the phone. I never would have thought you were black. I mean, wow, you sound like you really know what you're talking about and you're black. Oh my God. And he continued throughout the deposition prep to make comments about how shocked and surprised he was that I was black and I actually knew what I was talking about and that I actually was able to do what I was there hired to do. I'll tell you one other story, and this was, I was on my way to a litigation section meeting, which is the organization that is helping put this event on. I'm on the executive committee and I have been for several years, and I was on my way. I was driving my car, which just happens to be a BMW, and I was pulled over by an officer who said I was speeding. I definitely was not speeding, but he said I was speeding. That was fine. And he asked me questions like, how did you get this car? And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, why are you in this car? Whose car is this? And I said, this is my car. He said, well, how can someone like you afford a car like this? And I said, well, what do you mean someone like me? I just want to know, how could you afford it? I said, I'm an attorney. I'm a partner at one of the biggest firms in the United States, and I can afford to buy a car. So, you know, I showed him all of my credentials and everything. And, you know, after a while, he finally released me. But these are the types of experiences that Black lawyers, that Black people have all the time. When they see you on the street, they don't know that you're a partner or a lawyer or you went to any particular school. They just see another Black face. And so this whole environment that we are living in, I believe it is raising awareness about the experience of Black people that many folks did not realize. And your degree, your position in life, your achievements do not insulate you from the racism that every other Black person in America experiences. So I'm hoping that through this forum that we can have a real conversation, and I want other folks to have their chance to speak, but have a real conversation about race and racism and what we can do to make this better. So thank all of you for being here and part of this discussion.
Wow, Terrance, thank you so much. The stories, you know, in the encounters with the police, people not thinking that you're a lawyer. I mean, people thinking that you don't sound Black, as anyone can sound anything, right? It's just, I'm always boggled. Can everyone please mute if you're not speaking? Okay. Wow. Well, with that, we have Dianne Jackson, McLean, and we also have Otis Bruce. Does anyone want to go? Dianne?
I can go, yes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
So thank you for listening. And, you know, I just, you know, as an African-American attorney, it's always heartening. It's hurtful for me to even listen to the stories because it hurts my heart that just to exist, we have to go through this. I grew up in a little town called Richmond, California, in Northern California. I was born and raised there. I grew up, I came from a family of 7 children, mother and father, and you know, they basically really instilled in us really the value of family. And so my families really supported each other. I was able to, you know, I went to public school. I went to Kennedy High School. Some of you may know that. And I also went to UC Berkeley. Um, but when I was growing up in Richmond, which Richmond has its own history, as many of you probably know, but at that time, the Black community was very supportive. And I just remember that the Black church in particularly really supported the community. And so I actually, because at that time, Black families everybody had a whole bunch of kids. And so you just kind of grew up with everybody. And everybody was your mother, and everybody was your auntie, and that kind of thing. And so I felt a lot of support, growing up in Richmond. And but I did experience the racism in terms of being tracked out of college prep classes. But I had a mother who fought for me to be in college prep classes. I had a mother who went to UC Berkeley and advocated for me to be accepted at UC Berkeley, and I was accepted. So it was something that my parents really kind of instilled with me. And so as a result of that, I actually went to Berkeley. I got a BA degree. I also went to Cornell University for a little while. I didn't last, but I was in the School of Criminology and went to UC Berkeley with one of my professors there. But I'm a California girl, and that snow just drove me crazy. So I came back to Berkeley and got a master's degree in city planning. And so I had the experience of working in city planning, both in Emeryville and Sacramento. In Sacramento, I was one of the first. I was the first African American city planner that they hired. And so as a result of that, I was always seen as different. I was always called gal, or, so you had those kind of experiences. And I moved back to the Bay Area, and I went back to law school. At that time, I decided to go to law school. I had been a city planner for 10 years, and I went back to law school as a single parent. My daughter was 8 years old. And I was determined that, I wanted to have more impact on my community. And I also, Adante, was in the League Up program. I was in the same class with Kamala Harris. And we had such a horrific time. They tried to disqualify all of the Black students out of Hastings at that time. There were 30 Black students admitted, and 21 of them was disqualified after the first year. So it was definitely a struggle. And but I made a determination that I was not going to let, just like my father has always told me, the importance of words and the importance of standing up for yourself. And so the more resistance I got at Hastings, the more I was determined that they were not going to kick me out of Hastings. Plus I had a little child to take care of. So, I had this motivation, like, you're not going to kick me out of here. And I am not only am I just as smart, I am more smart. I am smarter than you. I know I am. So I just kind of had that kind of fighting spirit. And when I got out, this is the experience that I had. I actually interviewed a lot on campus, and most of the times I didn't get a call back, but I was able to get a job because there was a Black partner in Roger Clay who was at Goldfarb and Littman. Goldfarb and Littman specializes in affordable housing, and he was the one who brought me into the firm. And as a result of that, I have been in the firm now for over 30 years. He brought in every Black attorney at Goldfarb and Littman, and we have 4 of them now. 4 of us are partners. And it was because of his effort that we were able to be partners. And that has been my experience. I am a real estate attorney, and I do affordable housing. I specialize in. I do a lot of public-private financing. I do a lot of developments. I'm the general counsel for the San Francisco Housing Authority. And so, I am doing a lot of these kind of activities. And I realized over the years that many times the work that I do, I get my assignments because there's generally a Black partner, or there's a Black project manager, or there's a Black city manager, but there's somebody of color who's bringing me in. And I wish that was not the case, but many times that is the case. And I also have found that when, particularly in the area that I work in affordable housing, many of the clients of affordable housing are people of color. And there is this kind of perception that people of color or people who would need affordable housing do not know what they need. And so there's this kind of attitude that we're going to tell you what kind of housing you need, and we're going to tell you what kind of services you need. And so I have really got a lot of resistance when I really start to stand up for people to get respect, because you know, to have respect for everyone. And also many times there is no, we had a big project in San Francisco where there was such a class of difference between the people for the housing that was being developed and the developers, that the type of housing was creating a lot of, I think, racist things going on. And so I really had to stand up, and I caught a lot of flack from the developers when I was trying to kind of advocate in terms of how you had to respect the tenants, and how they also, that the Privacy Act, the privacy right of the federal government didn't say to only apply to rich people, that, you know, poor people also had privacy rights, and that you cannot just give their information to them out to the developers, even though the developers said, well, we know what's good for them. And I'm like, no, you don't. You have to get their permission before you use their private, you know, use their information. And I caught so much flack from the government and from different attorneys about, you know, well, why don't you just let us take care of them? I was like, that's the problem. Many times people, white people think that they can take care of you, that they know better for you. And that's racist in and of itself, because you can't. And so that's kind of the world that I am in constantly. And the other thing that happens, I know in my firm, we have had an issue, you know, just in the practice of real estate, just in the practice of I am also a partner in a firm where, you know, the assignments, how you get assignments and how things are happening. And we do a lot of government work, a lot of public agency work, but many times the work is assigned or allocated based on people that look like the client. And many times the attorneys, I've had the experience where the attorneys, even my partners, have not stood up for me. Sometimes I have, but sometimes I haven't. I had a major project where, for whatever reason, the city attorney wanted someone that was a little bit older, a little bit more looked like him. And so they said, well, Dianne can do the work, but we want you to sign off on it. And and this client gave my firm a lot of money. So instead of my partner saying, no, I'm going to let Dianne sign off, they came to me and said, can you just do the work and sign off so we can keep the client? You know, so it's like, so that just made me feel really like nothing. And so those are the kind of things that I, you know, have seen, that I see going on. And also, you know, how it's, when things happen in the firm or things happen with your clients, you know, many times the firms are so dedicated to keeping the client that they let their attorneys of color be disrespected. And so that's really a very heartbreaking experience. And I think that is something that has to change. I have found that the way of addressing racism in the real estate area has been, unfortunately, to get involved with many of the white groups. I am also a very active member of the California Association of Black Lawyers. I'm also a member of Charles Houston Bar Association. And those groups, I go to those groups because they nourish my soul. They give me the strength to stay in the legal profession and to go into the white groups so that we can develop those relationships, so that we can make a change. Because many times in the other organizations, they have no experience with dealing with African-American attorneys. And so they have no perspective. And I think as a result of developing those relationships, and that's one reason why I have been involved in the real property section, is so because it is a group that is like diversity, is to be able to expand that experience and also to bring more diversity in that area, because real property is a social issue. If you do not have housing, you can't do anything if you don't have housing. And yes, some people of color need to be in this negotiation. There are many things that happen when you're negotiating a deal that is all subjective. It has nothing to do with legality. It's business issues. And so developing those, developing that trust, developing the tenacity to really stand up and to do things that are fair, and also to develop a relationship with our colleagues, I think is a way for us to really kind of expand and to really break down some of the barriers, and also for the white attorneys to be able to stand up and say stuff when you're in those meetings. When they say something about an African-American attorney that is racist, you got to have the courage to say something, because I think we get tired of always having to say something. We get tired of always having to defend why we're here, or why we're good. We know we're good, and we're good, but you need to say something. So anyway, that's all I'm going to say. So thank you.
Wow, well, thank you so much. I appreciate that, and I know the experience as an urban planner beforehand, and various Black and Brown communities not being brought to the table whose communities were at stake, right? So I understand that, and I thank you so much for sharing that. Last, we will have Mr. Otis Bruce.
Yes, thank you all. Thank you, Ona and Adriana and Ellen and the CLA Litigation Committee for putting together this panel and this genuine discussion that we're having here. Before I say something about who I am to the core, as you can see who I am in this video, African-American men and women combined are still right at 4% of all lawyers in the state of California. That's an atrocity. That's a shame. We still only together, if you put all the African-American lawyers together, we're only 4% of the entire lawyer population in this state. But let's reverse those statistics. There's power in numbers. Being 4%, that means we can make sure we have a 96% share of justice, share of opportunity, share of what's right, share of represent our people, represent people in general, for our firms, our business, our community. If we teach our children, you might be one, but you are mighty. You might be one, but you are strong. You might be one, but you can deal with the 99% if you let them know who you are. And you will not compromise who you are. You will not compromise your values, your morals, your commitment to what's right. And as lawyers, as professionals, as advocates, we are the vanguards of everything that's going on in this country right now, in this world. We are the ones who can make the real statement and make the corrections, because we are in the room talking about the laws, the policies, the regulations, the careers, the jobs, and we work together as allies, because the African-American colleagues that I know in this state, and which is all of you, many of you, are some of the sharpest lawyers ever. And I often ask myself, as I come upon 30 years in this business, who's gonna be the next John Burris? Who's gonna be the next Willie Brown? Who's gonna be the next Ona? Who are we going to rise up and teach and mentor and carry forward that mantle of what we're talking about right now? For 5 to 10 years, we won't be having this conversation. It'll be coming up, but it won't be as intense, because we're functioning in real time, ladies and gentlemen. And I can share with you why I'm so passionate about this from my seat right now speaking to you. In my background, you see 2 photos in my office. One is a Black man, 20 years old, in a military uniform. That's my father. The other one is a Black man sitting out in the field in a rocking chair, holding a book with a sweater on, looking like he graduated from Harvard or Yale. But that's my grandfather with a 3rd grade education. And I have those gentlemen photos prominently in my office to remind myself not to lose focus. Unlike your colleagues that came before me, and I know Adante, I see a lot of faces on this Zoom town hall that I recognize from around the Bay Area, and thank you. But I'm from segregated schools in Mississippi. I went to segregated schools through the 6th grade. When I was in the 7th grade, they closed my all-black school in 1970, and they bused us 17 miles to the all-white school. And when we got there the first week of the school, all the white kids, when we got off the bus, all the white students got on the bus and in their family cars, and they took their children away. All the black kids, we had the school to ourselves for about the first 2 or 3 weeks of being there. I'm the oldest of 6 kids. I grew up in a little town, Soso, Mississippi, right outside of Laurel, between Meridian and Hattiesburg. And that is the bastion of racism and hate and bigotry along that corridor that you ever want to read about, think about, and experience. I've experienced it all on every level. And as you see my face here, most of you who've known me for years as being the brother over in Marin County. And they don't know that I pick cotton, I haul watermelons, I worked at a quarter horse stable when I was 16, 17, 18 years old. I chopped corn, I herd cows, and my grandfather was an influence on me as a sharecropper. And what that means is that he was a barterer. And watching him as I grew up, I learned the power and importance of networking and understanding how to relate to people, because I watched him, how he worked with the white guy who owned all the land. And I watched when he said stuff like, hey, if you ever want to know how to deal with people, you watch how they deal with their own folk. The way they deal with their own folk will tell you what they think about you. So how we are dealing with this issue relating to our people should tell everybody what we believe in and what we represent. So when I looked around myself growing up and being influenced by my elders, as most of us were in the church and the community, I realized there were no black lawyers in my community in Mississippi. I didn't know any lawyers. Didn't even think about figured out that there were any lawyers. But what I did learn was that I got empowerment from my community, who push you, as Attorney Jackson said, who push you forward to make you give those speeches in church, to make you rewrite your essays, made you do everything you had to do, and that had an impact on me. So when they, in my school, in my community, start talking to me about maybe that young Bruce boy will be a lawyer or a teacher one day, he's really passionate about speaking in church. You give him a mic or give him a poem, he's very passionate. And they said that so often that I started believing it, that I could be a lawyer one day. And that was at 14 years of age. So as all the way through high school, when I went to the integrated high school, when the counselors started talking to you about what do you want to do when you grad from high school, I said, I'm going to be a lawyer. I don't know where, but I'll be a lawyer one day. And interesting enough, when I graduated from high school, unlike my distinguished colleagues here, the high school principal's wife, who was the counselor, she tried to direct me to work in the local chicken porchery, which is that, and most of you colleagues don't know what that means. That means all the fancy chickens and hot wings and things you eat now. That was the place where they processed the chickens. And when I told her I actually aspired to go to law school, she tried to discourage me by living my dream. So I left Mississippi. I came to California with this whole passion, this desire that I'm going to make something out of myself. Why? because I'm the oldest of 6 children, single parent mom raising 6 children in a 3-bedroom shotgun house with no restroom and no water, no running water, all the way until I was 16. So when I mentor students, I'm very passionate about their successes. So when I got to California and I decided that I wanted to go and pursue this dream, this whole ideal of being a lawyer, I wished I had the mentors that some of you have and have had and still have. I have you all as my mentors and brethren right now all over, every lawyer in this state, and specifically my African-American brothers and sisters. But I didn't necessarily have that. My mother never told me I had to go to college. My dad never told me. So when I got here, I stayed with my uncle on Sterling Drive in Oakland Hills, slept in his basement on the couch, and I had to establish residency so I can go to Merritt College on the Hill. So when I went to Merritt College, I actually decided that I was going to choose a career where I can work and push myself through school, to go to law school. So my first aspiration was to become a police officer. And when I finished Merritt College, I had the GPA to get accepted to Berkeley, Davis, any of the UC schools. But the professor at that point directed me to San Jose State because they had a good criminal justice administration program. So that was the only reason I didn't go to Cal Berkeley. So I go to San Jose, and I get to San Jose, and I finished, when I finished San Jose State, and my participation on campus in my courses, Dr. Michael Milner, who's still probably at San Jose State right today, the professor of Black history, he was the one who told me, he said, brother, you should not pursue being a police officer. You should go straight fulfill your dream to be a lawyer because there's a place for you in the Bay Area. So I bypassed applying to San Jose State to be a city of San Jose to become a police officer. And I only applied to 2 law schools. And I applied to Santa Clara Law School, and I applied to Hastings. And Hastings didn't work out for me. I ended up having to go to Knight Law School. It's New College of California School of Law. It's now, I guess, merged with JFK. But I went to, I worked full-time at Mervyn's corporate office, stores and auditing books and stuff. And I worked at a Chevron gas station in the Bay Area and went to Knight Law School. And when I got out of law school, after meeting all this distinguished brother, the legendary John Burrs, Charles Bonner, all those distinguished brothers were like my mentors. They're still my friends and my mentors, my big brothers. And I looked around the Bay Area, ladies and gentlemen, and I saw the competition in LA, Sacramento, Alameda County, and the City County of San Francisco. And I decided that with the life that I had lived in Mississippi, and we, in my community, there were no Asians, Latinos, Vietnamese, anybody other than Black people, white people, and Choctaw Indians. Those were the only 3 races in my community when I was growing up. And we had no fear of anybody. The Black stayed on their side, the white stayed on their side, and the Choctaw Indian was on the reservation. And in my community, we were insular and very close. And we had no fear in the sense of who we are. But the N-words and the discrimination, I don't even have to get into that. But when I got out of law school and really decided that what I wanted to do, I never intended to work for a law firm because I saw and I understood these statistics. And I saw that if you got on an associate track, it took you 5 years. And most of the brothers and sisters I knew that were pursuing those careers weren't getting hired in law firms. And most of them were starting their own firms. So I decided that I was going to look around the Bay Area and I was going to go to one of these communities where I felt there weren't that many African Americans probably living or pursuing careers. And I was going to go to Contra Costa County, Sonoma, Napa, or Marin. And I chose Marin County. And when I came to Marin County, I found out there were no Black government attorneys in this whole building over here. No Black public defenders, no Black city attorneys, no Black deputy county councils, and definitely no Black deputy DAs. And it took me 3 years after law school to finally get a job in this county. And when I moved my family here in '86, I decided to get more active in the community with Rotary clubs and other kind of, I did a lot of volunteering in Marin City, just to get a feel of this area to make sure it was okay to finish raising 3 of my 5 children in this community, because otherwise we were going to leave. But when I saw that the only competition I had was myself, and I couldn't help anybody else until I got in a position to help myself, then where I could be able to influence some things in my life. So I pursued that. So I had to start off at a volunteer position with a law degree for no pay for a whole year. And then that turned into like a $15 an hour legal assistant job. And then that turned into me going to the district attorney's office, because I start off with the Marin County Council's office, going to the district attorney's office, just cold, and asking to volunteer to work on some projects and work on some cases. I got an opportunity to do that. And then after working in there for a year, I got hired as a full-time legal assistant. And I go, yes, I got my foot in the door. Then I set my eye on becoming a deputy district attorney. I wasn't sure if they were going to hire me. So what I did, I started getting more involved in the National Black Prosecutor Association, other organizations, just in case I had to break away and open my own law firm, and I was going to be ready. But when I got hired as a deputy DA, in 1995, the reporter for a local paper had indicated to me that he wanted to write a story in the local Marin IJ about my accomplishment. And he said, "Do you realize you're the first Black prosecuting attorney in the history of Marin County ever?" I said, "I know that." I said, "That was my goal, to break down cross that line, cross that color line, that barrier. That was my goal." He said, "I want to write an article about you." I said, "Well, man, you can't write no article about me unless it be based on the truth of who I am." And none of my colleagues in my office never heard my story. They didn't know anything about me other than they thought I was from Marin City, or they thought I was from the East Bay, or they thought I was from Oakland. They had no idea that one of their colleagues grew up and did everything that you think of the farm laborers in the Central Valley are doing. I've done it, everything. And that's why I can empathize with anything and any of their struggles, because I've lived it. And so when I pursued becoming a deputy district attorney, I actually realized that, oh, I'm here, but I got to stay grounded. I got to stay connected to Oakland. I got to stay connected to LA. I got to stay more connected to Mississippi. So having a law degree and going back to Mississippi and being involved in that community, I'm gonna tell you some stories. I've gotten told by the local sheriff in Mississippi, yeah, with the N-word, well, you can go on back to California with your law degree and all your preppiness. I got all that going back there several times over the years, okay? Until they saw me making sure that referrals to some people whose rights and interests were not being handled right, and those people would call, and if I make a referral and tell them how to handle it, then they understood where I was coming from this far in California. So mind you, when I got here, and I'm sharing this with y'all passionately, when I come over to Marin County, I realized that I had to get involved outside of the DA's office. And I realized that I have a passion for people. I genuinely and sincerely care about people. I realized in my career that a lot of us lawyers, a lot of lawyers on this panel, not necessarily present company excluded, but I know a lot of lawyers in this state, in this country, that don't give a damn about people. They don't care about people. They don't sincerely, genuinely like people, but they want the business. They want the clients. They want the prestige. They want the money. We are in the people business. That's what we do. That's our resource. And we have to sincerely care about our case, our clients, our victims, and our witnesses. And another thing that pushed me even more to pursue being a prosecutor, of all the injustice, no justice, some justice, wannabe justice that I've seen in my lifetime, I realized that the more of us that we have in the room, at the table, not with our hands open, with our fists closed, that's power and influence, as Dianne said and Brother Terrance said. We need to have more of us in the room. Not enough of us are in the room, as Adrieannette said, about the struggles to getting hired. And once you get hired, you still got to prove yourself. You still got to fight for a seat at the table. And then every time you get to the table, people think you have your hand out. Well, don't go to the table with your hands out as often. Network, but keep your hands closed and know more than what they think you know when you're in the room at the table. So when I realized as a prosecutor, a victim of a crime can be anybody. And there are more victims of crimes. There's more Black people, brown people, and other people who are victims of crime than probably any other race in this country and over the world. There's more the women of domestic violence and elder financial abuse and the redlining and the housing discrimination. Those are our people who are victims. And for you civil prosecutor, I commend you. And so what I realized, this is an important career for me to pursue. Because
thank you so much, Mr. Otis Bruce. I appreciate you sharing with us. Your story is so powerful. And I personally could listen to all these stories for a long period of time, but our program is actually wrapping up in 2 minutes. So we didn't get a chance to get to our Q&A, unfortunately, because we're wrapping up in 2 minutes. But I want to thank Ellen, Miller, Ona, everyone at CLA. We have Brianna who helped put this on, Lauren, and also Leif. If you're on, Leif is at Otis. Otis is actually going to be speaking next week on July 1st. Leif, if you're on, do you want to go ahead and talk a little bit about the next town hall?
Sure. Thank you, Adrieannette. We are doing a town hall next week that's going to be focusing on criminal law practitioners, including Otis, and talking about the impact of race, particularly in the criminal justice system, with some practice perspectives from folks on the defense side and the prosecutor side. So we would love to have you join us for that. And maybe, Ellen, if we can drop the link to that into the chat, you can see all the information there. Thank you for an incredibly powerful program tonight, Adrieannette.
Great. Thank you so much. And our next meeting for the Racial Justice Working Group